What's up, everyone? Sam Shaw here, founder of Wall Street Mastermind. Really excited to be doing this client interview today with you guys. We have Jai on with us, and this is our first client interview for the summer 2023 recruiting cycle. And so that's why I'm extra excited to do it because these are always fun. But first one is extra special because I just feel like recruiting season is now really well underway, and even offers are still starting to come. Oh, well, when I say well underway, it's only mid-March right now, but yes, offers are starting to come out, which is crazy, by the way. We can talk about that, but Jai got an amazing offer going straight to the buy side, and so I want to get him on here to talk to you guys about how he was able to do that, and also just what it actually takes to get that type of outcome, because I think, quite honestly, maybe 10% of our clients go straight to the buy side. And I always tell people there are people that want to do that, and it's doable, but obviously I think the degree of difficulty is even that much higher, right? So Jai, thank you for taking the time to be here with us today, man. Maybe you can start off by just introducing yourself a little bit so people kind of have a sense for who you are.
Yeah, so thanks, Sam. My name is Jacob Napoli. I'm currently a sophomore here at Georgetown, the business school, double majoring in finance and operations and information management, and also doing a minor in philosophy. Came to Georgetown just through recruiting. I was recruited for lightweight rowing, and ended up taking a gap year between high school and college. And through that gap year, I kind of figured out that I really want to do a career in finance. So read all the value investors and things of that nature. But coming into my freshman year, Georgetown, like most colleges, is pretty competitive in terms of clubs. So freshman year, applied to all the investment clubs, didn't get in. And I was like, okay, this is not a good sign, just because I know that most of these clubs are feeders into sort of the top programs, top sell side offers. And also I want to do it on the buy side. So I kind of need to be in one of these clubs. So found Sam online and was sort of at a time when I definitely needed a lot of help. Didn't really know how to sell myself. Didn't know much about finance and technicals, and I knew that I wanted to be one step ahead of the process, and first and foremost want to get into some of these clubs. So that sort of first failure of not getting into any investment club here at Georgetown kind of led me to find Sam, and lucky I did, and he's definitely been a huge mentor. So he helped me through those first initial couple of interviews, and ended up getting pretty much every single investment club that I applied for at Georgetown. And then from there, sort of the path was set. I knew that I had my groundwork sort of laid out here at Georgetown, and then knew that everything else would come down to networking and sort of having the technicals nailed down, which Sam definitely helped me with. But yeah, that pretty much sums it up for how I started and found Wall Street Mastermind.
Yeah, I actually have forgotten about that. But so you're saying first semester you try to get into these clubs and you couldn't get into any of them, but then you
Yeah,
tried. I know you started working with us. I think it was
winter. I think winter break. So winter break, 20 my freshman year winter break. So basically, a year and a half ago, I found Sam, and basically the huge sort of catalyst for that was I didn't get into any of the clubs, and I knew I didn't prep, didn't come from a prep school, had no one I knew in finance, so I didn't sort of know how these processes worked. And then I knew Sam, just due to having so many clients, understood what the proper pathway is to break into banking, and also what people want to hear during interviews. So might have been definitely a little bit overkill at the time, but I knew it was the right path and decision to get out ahead, just because I really liked the analogy Sam sort of said in sort of the sort of stuff, the advertisements he was saying, is that it's important to either run the race faster than everyone else or run it before everyone. And I knew that Georgetown's a pretty competitive school. Looking at it, we definitely send 10 to 15 people to top offers. So I knew that I wasn't in that sort of top offer group currently, just because 10, 15 kids get into the investment fund freshman year in the first semester. So I already thought I was not in that group. So I knew something had to change. So either I had to run faster or start earlier. So I ended up doing both. But yeah.
That's awesome. So then the second semester you tried again for the exact same clubs, but this
exact same clubs, and got into all of them. So yeah, off the program, I think went through all the behaviorals, prepped all the behaviorals, sent it to you, did a mock interview with you, and then ended up getting all the clubs that I needed for freshman spring. So yeah, that's how I knew the program was working, and that the buy-in definitely validated that. So yeah.
Yeah. What was the biggest difference then between the first time and second time? It's just you just got better at interviewing them? Is it those interviews are for the clubs are both behaviorals and technicals, or
mostly behavioral? But I think seeing using your behavioral module and seeing like, oh, this is how like, because like I think I had all the sort of right phrases and stuff like that, but didn't know how to package it all together. So I think that like hearing you walk through people's answers and like hearing someone live talk, like who got the kid at Dartmouth, who I know like you talked about, who got like every single offer in his year, like hearing him talk through the answers, like it was really, really simple, but I was shocked when I recorded myself and like I spoke to you and you were like, that is so, you were so far off currently from where that kid was, even though like in my mind, what he didn't do was like that groundbreaking, but like that sort of bridging that gap and like having coaching definitely really helped me. So I think like being exposed to like what the right answers were, and then also from my aspect, like seeing the interview process the second time definitely helped.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point, which is like with the behavioral stuff, a lot of times it's not that your answer is that far off or that you have to come up with like these super groundbreaking, mind blowing answers or whatever. But a lot
Mhm.
of it is actually just like you have the content, but then like how do you package together and the delivery aspect of it. And I think like what most people are missing is when you just prep your own behaviorals, you're only thinking about like how you're going to do it,
Mhm.
but then you have no benchmark against like anybody else in terms of like how do I actually stack up against the competition. But like once you can actually see like, okay, this guy, this is someone who got every single offer and this is kind of what he sounds like and this is the level that he's at, now you can kind of like calibrate yourself against that. And then like as long as you have something to kind of emulate, like your answer is not obviously not exactly the same as his,
Mhm.
but like that can be like an eye-opening thing, right? Because it's like, okay, now I know like this is the gap and this is how much further I have to go. Which I think like on the technical side, everyone always knows like, oh, I need to learn more technicals. I don't know, you know, the DCF or I don't know this or that. On the behavioral side, everyone always just feels like, oh yeah, my answer's pretty good, right? It was like,
Yeah,
I don't know how to make it better, right? Like,
especially for these buy side interviews, I think that even more is because they don't expect you to have that much technical knowledge. I think the buy side actually behaviorals are probably more important than the sell side, just given that they want to see people who have genuine interest and like can think really critically about why they want to go into investing. So I think that like the program helped me even more from that perspective to like be able to talk clearly about my interests in investing. And I think that like just to sum it up, I think buy side was definitely more behaviorally focused and like being succinct was more important than like because like for instance I had like an Evercore phone screen for like Georgetown, and that was pretty much all technical. So like they don't even care like about your behaviorals. So, like that you can pretty much just hard study for, but the behaviorals I think are really what bridges the gap between getting an offer on the buy side and not.
right, right. Yeah, I mean, elite boutiques tend to be a lot more technical for sure.
Yeah.
Uh, so I mean, I looked at the list because you know how you kind of like showed me like the list of questions that you were asked like in your buy side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I mean, it seemed like they asked you a good mix of both technicals and behaviorals. And some of the questions they asked I thought were like pretty interesting. To be honest, like I'm trying to see which one I was thinking about. Like for example, the one about uh, like if you could be the CEO of one company, like which
Yeah.
company would you want it to be and why? Like I thought that was a really interesting one. Like I don't typically see that one, right? And
Yeah, I think they're more like at least how I thought about it is I think that like well in this case I think it really tested who's been reading a lot for like a long time. So I think it really tested who was really curious into the space. So I think one thing Wall Street Mastermind was really good about was giving me the sort of like the understanding of what's happening in markets through the technical education. But I and like you sent me so many sort of documents like on the side that gave me deep dive primers into the industries I was interested into. But I think you definitely have to go one step above whatever the materials are out there and actually be interested in be interested in reading about it.
yeah, yeah, I think that's a good point. I think my computer might have been lagging a little bit, so I don't know if people
Yeah.
caught what you said, but like really testing on people who like are genuinely interested in the industry, right? Like I think that's something that's really hard to fake, right? Because a lot of students, what they're doing is like maybe they'll just like if you went into these interviews and you just like memorize the answers from the 400 questions or something, like that's what a lot of people
Yeah.
do. But like at that level, you can't really speak like an intelligent investor, right? Which is really like what they're looking for with questions like this. Is like which company would you want to be the CEO of and why? Like you now have to, it's no longer just about talking about like, oh, how to do valuation or how to do an LBO, whatever. You have to actually like be able to talk about a company and what you like about it and what you don't like about it, right? What are its strengths, what are its weaknesses, and like that's like we call it like application knowledge, right? It's
Yeah.
not like that's not stuff you can just memorize out of a book anymore, right?
No, I agree. So I think like for that, like podcasts really helped me. So I think that was like the sort of the one tool that like I've been sort of like an avid consumer of just like content in this space. So, like really been following the investing world for since like the gap year. So I've had like sort of 2-3 years of understanding the like sort of the world and like how like really top investors think. So I think that was like the gap for me, was really reading about the space, reading all the top investors, like their investment memos, the books that they recommend reading. Like I know Ackman and Buffett, like every like shareholder conference, they release like 10 books that they thought were sort of helpful for them. So I think actually reading those things and then like reading, like listening to podcasts like Invest Like the Best or Capital Allocators, I think that was the reason why. Because I once you hear from the top people and the way they speak is completely different than how college students talk about investing. So if you're able to use sort of phrases and analogies that they've used and like sort of talk like they do, I think that it definitely comes across. And it definitely takes, I think that's why I'd sort of recommend starting Wall Street Mastermind or any program like this really, really early, is that you need to understand the framework, like why are people doing LBOs, like how does an LBO work? So then you can apply it when you're listening to these podcasts or you see deals
Yeah. Yeah, I was actually going to ask, like, I think that's a good segue into, I think like the biggest question that I think people will probably have from listening to this interview right now is, okay, you're going to like a mega fund, right out of college or for you, not even out of college, for your junior summer. And that's like obviously amazing because a lot of people, they try to, they want to get into banking, yes, but a lot of people, if I'm being completely honest, they want to get into banking so then they can end up at the mega funds. And so it's like,
yeah.
so to like be able to go straight to that, like that's obviously great, right? It's like, why not? You can go straight, but like, I think the biggest question for people is like, and I was telling you this earlier, like I had someone asking me just a couple of days ago, like, can you actually go straight to the buy side from this program? And I told him like, yes, you can. And we have people that have done it just like you're doing it now. But I would say it's like maybe 10% of the people are able to do it right inside of our program. So it's definitely not the majority. And I think like the bar is even higher. And like, if I were to ask you, like, what were the things that you think you had to do differently from maybe like people who are just trying to get into banking and not necessarily straight to the buy side? Like, what were some things that you think you had to do that were like maybe extra or maybe incremental to, if you
Yeah.
were aiming for banking? Like, I think for sure one, I'll tell you what I think. For sure, one is like the fact that, like you said, you started really early, right? Because like you starting beginning of freshman year, a lot of people, I would say, like they wait till like sophomore year to start because like even sophomore year feels early, right? But like that's when people start to feel like a bit more urgency about recruiting. But the fact that you started freshman year, I think like that gives you an entire year more than like a lot of other people. Going back to that analogy, like you either start running the race earlier or you run faster. And
Yeah.
in this case, like you said, like to get to this level, I think you have to do both.
I agree. I think that one thing also helped me was the fact that like you've laid out a way to find internships within the program. So I think that was one thing that was really, really helpful, was finding that first search fund internship was really crucial, I think, for me, because it definitely shows interest as a freshman that you've like had to sort of network your way into a search fund. It shows a lot of like dedication and that you're actually genuinely interested into the space. And also it helps you get other internship experiences. So I think that was one thing as a freshman. As I remember, like you were advising me, like, oh, apply using like these websites in our database. There's all these firms, and I'll help you prep for these interviews, and they're not super super hard, and they're kind of a walk in the park. But you definitely have to get these before you can get more legitimate internships. So I think that the process that you've had there, just like for selecting the first internship, was sort of crucial, because now that led me sort of to work at a place in the summer, and then now this summer I'm gonna be working in middle market private equity. And I think that's all because I got internships early. So that, I think that was that whole network and funnel that you sort of showed me the light to was definitely crucial.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, which is like when we say like start running the race early, part of that is like you start building your resume earlier, right? And then so like I don't know how many relevant internship experiences you already had on your resume by the time you started recruiting for your junior summer, but
Yeah.
it's probably like what three? Probably at
I,
least.
I've had three, yeah. So I think that was the crucial thing is like a lot of kids still have stuff from high school on their resume. Like they still have their high school GPA. Like I know for like interviewing for two of my clubs on campus, like I'll see sophomores having stuff from high school on their resume. And in my mind, that's kind of like the kid probably is not that passionate about the space just because like I think like most of the kids at my school who do end up getting recruited are like people who found freshman year internships, sophomore year internships, are doing something during the year within their clubs or another on-campus internship like virtually. So I think that like you definitely helped me outline like what the process is and what the gold standard is for recruiting. But I definitely think that was like you need to be doing internships earlier, especially now because even now if you think about it, like if the top people are going for the buy side, like elite boutiques are still very competitive to get. So like even those kids who are recruiting for elite boutiques pretty much have the same experiences on the buy side, but maybe they can't talk about deals the same or like haven't applied to the buy side yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, like let's say you want to have three relevant internships on your resume by the time you have to apply for these junior summer internships, like based on the current recruiting timeline, if you did your first one, because I think this is what you did your first
Yeah.
one, second semester of freshman year,
Yes.
your second one, freshman summer, and you could probably squeeze in another one like first semester,
During the year. Yeah.
and that's three. And then recruiting starts like right then and there. So like for people that are starting sophomore year, let's say, you already missed those first two internships, right? And like
Exactly.
not saying you can't get into banking or whatever at that point, but I think realistically speaking, if you want to get into like these top buy side firms, like that's probably out of reach at that point, right? And
No, completely agree. I think that's like especially because like the sort of the why private equity answer is the one you really have to nail or why the hedge funds or something like that answer is the most important one other than tell me about yourself. And I think that if you don't have because pretty much all the answers are going to be the same, the only differentiable factor is that you actually have experience in the space. So that's the only way you can distinguish yourself as a candidate because everyone else is going to have the same answer like, oh, I love like working with companies over the long term, or like my sort of personality dictates that I want to work in private markets, or like I'm fascinated by people in the space. Like all the cookie cutter answers are exactly the same. The only thing you can say is like I've done 3 internships in the space. I'm working in middle market private equity this summer. So like I have demonstrated interest. And I think that's the only way that you could sort of
yeah.
nail those answers so they stop grilling you. Yeah.
I think like the way I would think about it is just this. It's just like the higher up you try to go in terms of like, because I would say like going straight to buy side mega fund private equity, that's like probably the hardest thing to do, right? So like the higher up you go, like the fewer jobs there are. I would say that's like the hardest thing to do. Then like elite boutiques are probably like if you're out doing banking, elite boutiques probably like the hardest to get into. Then bulge bracket, the middle market, and so just like the more you try to go towards the top, the fewer spots there are. There's way less buy side jobs at the undergrad level than there are banking jobs, right? And so like the margin for error is basically like you have to check at this level. You have to check every single box. You got to go to a good school. You got to have good GPA. You got to have like I said, probably like 3 relevant internships on your resume by the time you apply. You're in all the right clubs. Like you're well read. You can speak in
Yeah, I also like a addition I'd add to that is like, like just for instance, like KKR I think takes 6 interns for America's PE. Like they one intern for each sort of group. So like TMT, I think I might be one of like the only intern in TMT in New York. But like think about it, you're also competing against diversity. And like maybe like the partner in the group went to Harvard and like so they might give a spot to Harvard. So like it's depending on what school you go to and like sort of if you're diversity or not, it's an even more sub-selected pool. So I think that like you really have to be running your race earlier and earlier because like I don't know, like for Blackstone, I think like most of the people that they recruit into PE are diversity. So you're running an even smaller race.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. There you go. Six interns. That's like most banking, most investment banks, their intern classes are could be 100 plus or 200 or whatever. So it's
Yeah.
like it's just a totally different ball game, right? So yeah, I think like Blackstone's. I had a client that was interviewing for tactical ops last year, and he was saying they took, I think, two people. It was like either two or
Three
three.
kids. I think one of them was Georgetown, two Harvards. I'm pretty sure. Like, yeah, but I
It's
know,
like two or
and
three.
the
Yeah,
yeah, and the one person was also diversity. So I think that's like, it's a very sub-selected field, and they're everyone's top of the class. So you really have to have shown emphasis if you're trying to break in as non-diversity and even non-target school or even target school. It's definitely hard.
yeah. So let me ask you this, dude, because like honestly, I mean, even when I first talked to you, like I felt like you were a really good candidate, right? And obviously, like there were things you needed help with and whatnot, but like, you went to a good school. You had just started school, so you didn't have a GPA at the time, so we didn't know what your GPA was going to be. But you're an athlete, right? So I knew you probably had good work ethic. Um, but like, I don't know. I feel like even if you didn't do Wall Street Mastermind, we'll never know. This is like an alternate universe, right? But like,
Yeah, yeah,
even if you didn't do Wall Street Mastermind, I feel like you're the type of person that probably would have still done like relatively well overall, right? And so I think like the question that a lot of people will have is like, is there really a big difference like that you did Wall Street Mastermind versus if you had just done this on your own? Because like the one of the most common questions that we get from people is like, well, why can't I just do this on my own? Or they'll say like, well, I know so many people that got offers on their own. So like
yeah.
if they could do it, then like I should be able to too, right? So like what would you say to that? We're like, is there really a big difference for someone like you who's already,
Yeah.
pretty smart guy, like, you're a good student, right? You're doing all the right things. Like
Yeah, that makes sense. I get your point. So I think the one thing is like sort of the confidence, right? So like I wanted something like a product I could be completely confident that if I committed myself, like I would get an offer. Because like even at these top target schools, right? If someone's like portfolio manager in the investment club, there's always one or two kids who have the perfect resume, perfect GPA, perfect extracurriculars, have networked hard, who should be getting an offer, who don't get offers. So even within then, there's still, you don't have a full margin of safety, right? That you are going to get an offer because there's always people, right? And there's circumstances that maybe you had a bad interview or like the interviewer didn't like you. So like I always wanted to hedge against this possibility that I was trusting like a senior or like someone in my investment fund who maybe got lucky or like did everything right. I definitely want something I could have confidence in because I knew like first job, especially in finance, is a really important stepping stone. So I didn't see the point in not making the investment and having sort of full certainty that if I dedicated myself to something 100%, that I would have an outcome that I would want. So even though I had everything going for me, one thing I wanted to do was have the confidence that I wouldn't have failed. And so I think like it's a huge investment, right? It is a sum of money, but you're gonna be making it back in your signing bonus. So like I don't think it's like, why would you not try to put everything in your pile to sort of get the top offer possible? And even if, let's say I could have gotten like microphone private equity even without Sam, like I don't think I would have felt as confident. Like it's definitely reassuring talking to someone who's done it and has tutored 200 300 kids, and when he says like you're probably prepared, like that's a lot more confident than some kid in your investment fund who's going to Goldman who like maybe has gotten lucky. So that was one thing. And the second thing I've now just realized through recruiting is that the community is super super helpful, right? So like going through the Slack and seeing what other people's processes are, like I didn't even know like Centerview or like Perella SF kicked off last week, like without seeing the Slacks. Like I think that the community has been another thing. Like you have access to like 300, 400 college kids who are going through the same thing you are. And you can see where they are in the process. Like I know like a couple kids have like sort of DM me because I've like talked in the chat a couple times, like, and we've been talking about what our processes are and our plans or like what the interviews are going to be like. So like I think the second thing is that you have access to 300 400 kids who are all going through the same process, who are all really really interested in finance, and they'll give you insights that you won't get from your own school, just because if you're not a target school, like we're not a target school for Evercore, like Centerview or these some of these firms, but some of these like people are at Penn in Wall Street Masterminds, like they were saying that like on Handshake they had the resume drop and stuff like that. So like I knew in my brain like, oh, Centerview is kicking off early, but like no one at Georgetown knew that except for me because I was in Wall Street Mastermind. So I think that the community and the insight you get into the recruiting process is second to none. Like I knew more about recruiting than anyone else in my campus just because I was in Wall Street Mastermind.
Yeah, I mean, I really love I really love that community aspect that you brought. It's like I feel like it's almost like we're a team and
Yeah.
everyone's together. And recruiting can be like a very lonely thing, right? Especially because like it could be kind of cutthroat, at least outside of Wall Street Mastermind, where like people are like everyone wants like the best offers, right? And like if you get an offer, that means that someone else is not getting that offer, and so a lot of times people aren't going to be like as helpful as you would hope that they would be. But for whatever reason, at least from what I've seen inside of Wall Street Mastermind, I feel like people are very collaborative, and they're not like it's not this like cutthroat culture where like people don't help each other out. You do get that informational edge, like you said, because we kind of like have such a big network and we can kind of like crowdsource what's going on, not just in your own school, but across all the other schools as well, right? And I think that's really helpful. But I think going back to the first thing you said, just like hedging against the possibility of like not getting an offer. Like I think that's one of the biggest things that I've noticed about um, like people that not just get offers, but like people that tend to get like the really elite offers, like the one that you guys like. Okay, they have 6 offers the entire year, right? Like the people that typically get to that level, their mentality is not from the beginning. Their mentality is not just like I'm just happy to be here, or like, oh, I just like as long as I get into banking, then like I'm happy. Like, because a lot of people think of this outcome as like a binary outcome of like, oh, either I get into banking or I don't, right? And yes, like if you get in versus if you don't get in, that's a huge difference. But to be honest, like it's not binary. Like it's a spectrum of outcomes. And it's like if you get in to a middle market bank versus a bulge bracket bank, that's a big difference. And if you get into like a bulge bracket or elite boutique bank versus like going straight to the buy side, that's also like a pretty big difference, right? I mean, big difference in terms of like career trajectory is kind of
Yeah.
what I'm talking about, but like actually is not a big difference in terms of like how good you are versus the guy that maybe only got into a bulge bracket or really boutique. You know what I'm saying? Like all the other students from your clubs at school that are going to get into like some of these banks, like it's not like you're just like way ahead of them in terms of like how prepared you are. Like they're also very prepared, right? But it's like the analogy I use, like, I mean, you row, but like even like, Olympic athletes when they run, like the difference between the person that podiums versus the person that's like fourth place, a lot of times it's like half a second or a second or whatever, right? And it's like, was that guy that much faster? No, but he was just like, that's the margin for error that we're talking about at that level, right? If you're not aiming for that level, then fine. Like maybe you have more slack or whatever, but the people that are like, no, I don't just want to be here. I want to make sure that I leave nothing on the table, and I want to make sure that I like maximize the probability, and I'm like putting my best foot forward, and then like seeing what happens from there. Like those are the people that tend to be the most successful in my experience. Like, I mean, you're certainly wired that way, but like there have been other students in Wall Street Mastermind that have been wired similarly, and typically also those are the people that like already go to the best schools, they already have good grades, they already like have their shit together, but they want more, right?
Yeah, I think even if you go to a top school, it even makes even more sense to do this program just because the recruiting team is looking at a lot of kids who are exactly the same on paper, right? Like 3-9, like just for instance, like 3-9 Georgetown, like does all the right clubs, has networked, has referrals everywhere. So like you're competing against your own school in some sense too. It's not like you're competing against the guy who goes to state school who maybe not has the same GPA. Like they're recruiting by a school basis, right? Like so like MS or City at our school has 5, 6, 7 spots like recruited for Georgetown people. So you still need to be like top of your class within the recruiting team. So if you're still doing all the same clubs everyone else does, reading all the same pass down guides, talking to all the same seniors, you don't have any advantage to anyone, right? So like the only advantage on our campus is to be in like in global platinum securities. So like that's the only like informational edge and like academic edge that exists. So like I viewed like Wall Street Mastermind as my edge. So like that's like why I can compete with people who are like in GPS or some other clubs like that, or like societies where they do recruit really, really well. Is because Wall Street Mastermind is just like that. It gives you that edge over your peers at your own school.
just for context for myself and for the listeners, so GPS is what, like the top feeder club at
For
Georgetown.
so like Global Platinum Securities is like 8 colleges. They recruit 4 kids every single year. And pretty much historically at most schools, like they're at Harvard, Wharton, London School of Economics, Georgetown. So primarily our top recruits from Georgetown come from my investment club and GPS. But usually GPS sends kids to PJT Restructuring, Evercore M&A. So really the top hitters. So yeah, that's like who you're competing against. Like I always felt like I need to compete against those kids at my school. So I was like, the only way I can do that is if I have a different advantage. And I thought Wall Street Mastermind was it.
Got it. So this is an intercollegiate thing, but they only recruit like from like a handful of really elite schools.
They have like a pod system at each school. So like each 8 schools has their own 3 analysts that they send, but like it's basically like recruiting for banking as a freshman. So like I was like I wasn't in Wall Street Mastermind at the time, so I wasn't prepared for that process. And in retrospect now it doesn't matter, but yeah, so like because you are competing against your own peers, so you need an advantage. So
Yeah.
Wall Street Mastermind provided that advantage for me.
Yeah, I think if we really just like sum up everything we're saying, it's just like, what's your mentality? Like your mentality should be like for something this important because it's your career, and for something this competitive because we're talking about like this is like the pinnacle of finance, right? I'm not trying to exaggerate, like it really is. Um, there's no such thing as having too much help, right? Like the people
Yeah.
are like, oh, like I should be able to get it on my own. It's like, yeah, you could potentially, but like you will almost certainly, not almost, you will definitely get a better outcome than whatever you get on your own if you have the help of someone who's done this hundreds of times. That's not like,
Yeah,
it's
completely
not,
agree. At least like even seeing my own peers going through it now, I feel like in retrospect now so confident, like just comparing myself compared to like what they feel, because I think that there's like a lot of bad information about there about recruiting. Like I think a lot of people don't understand that, as you emphasize, like the value of networking, the value of sort of creating a funnel, like the network effects of having one contact referring you to other people. I don't think people understand what it takes to run the race. I think that they like do rely on the fact that like I do go to a target school, I have a above 3.7 GPA, I should be fine. But in reality nowadays, like you need to be as hungry as a kid from the non-target while even being at a target school. So yeah.
yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. I guess let me ask you one last question because this is I feel like we talked about a lot of stuff already, but um, if you if you could give just like only one piece of advice to maybe someone who's just going through the process now, or maybe they just entered college, but their goal is kind of like yours, aiming very high. You know, they want to get into either at least the best banks, or maybe go straight to the buy side. Like, was there like one piece of advice that maybe you got from someone about
Yeah.
recruiting that really?
I, I think it's probably from you. Just run the race early. I think that's the easiest way, honestly, is because life gets very stressful, right? Like when school picks up, it's always easy to say I'll move recruiting down the line. Like freshman year, I think for me, really helped that I got serious and had Sam like supporting me and laid down what the steps and the markers I should be hitting are to sort of be prepared for recruiting. So I can't like sort of overemphasize the importance of starting early and creating a plan. And I think that's sort of what I had trust in my process. So like I think a lot of people now that they're coming into it are changing their plans, or like saying maybe I won't recruit now for elite boutiques because they haven't really trusted their process and had a really formulated plan since day one. So I think that's the number one thing I'd say is start early and trust the process that you've created. And I also think it's definitely good to have introspection as why you want to do the job. So I think that that's one thing that really helped me was you should be consuming all the content you can out there about different industries, right? So like I was interested in restructuring and going to the buy side. So um read everything I could out there, and Sam gave me a lot of materials that were really helpful. But I think that like they are now like searching for people who've done the hard mental work of figuring out what true like why truly intellectually they're drawn to the job. So I think that like doing some of the deep hard work about thinking about why you want to do it is the second piece of advice I'd give.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's really good advice. Yeah, man. I mean, starting early, I think it's just like so important. And you know, you talk about people changing plans. I think part of the reason people are being forced to change plans is because recruiting keeps happening earlier and earlier every year, and then like people keep getting caught off guard, and they're like, oh wait, Elite Boutique's already started. Oh, but I haven't done X, Y, and Z thing. Oh, I'm not ready. Okay, so now they have to kind of like move the goalpost. And sometimes even as people are moving the goalpost, they're like, they don't want to feel bad about it, so they're telling themselves like, oh, it's okay, like it's not a big deal. Like I didn't really want it that much anyway, or whatever. It's like you just don't. You'd rather not get into that situation, right?
I think even this year, especially, we've seen now like every single firm has kicked off February, March now, which like most people now thought April, May. Like even in my own shoes, like being as well prepared as I was a little shocked. And like I didn't change my goalpost, but like for a second there, I was like, oh, maybe I'm now not prepared because they've moved recruiting up so far up. So I think it definitely rewards people who have advantages like this and have thought about starting early. So I think that recruiting now will only start earlier and earlier. So there's the best advice is if you're a freshman, um, start early. That's pretty much it because recruiting is only gonna maybe next year gonna start in January for all we know.
In 2 years, I'm gonna start marketing to high school seniors.
No, I think it might be smart. Honestly, they're gonna have to talk about deals that happen sort of during high school. But yeah,
Yeah, it's getting crazy out there. I mean, I like even JP Morgan, Goldman, guys that usually wait until the summer, the sophomore year, they're not waiting anymore. I think they just got sick and tired of like having all the other banks take all the best candidates, by the time they start recruiting, right? So like JP started February 1st this year, Goldman supposedly April 1st, but I heard they've already been doing like select interviews behind the
yeah.
scenes. So it's just getting crazy out there. So anyway, long story short, guys, I think like what we're saying is start early. Like start as
No, it's as simple as it seems. I don't think it's honestly that I'm like way smarter than anyone else in the country. I just think that I started really early and had a really good idea if I want what I wanted to do, and I had the resources available to me through Wall Street Mastermind through my school that allowed me to do this. And also like there's not that many like people looking out for you with recruiting, so I think that like having a mentor, like going to office hours here were super helpful just because none of your professors really have the time to like do one-on-one stuff. Everyone in your investment fund has done what 2-3 years of school and like have had maybe half a year of internship experience, and like they haven't even done their summer offer, most of them who are giving you advice. So there's really like a lack of knowledge, I think, and the credibility at the undergrad level. So I think having a mentor is super important.
Yeah, I think what like starting early is like what was it like you start running the race earlier, so you get a head start, and then having a mentor is the second part of like helping you run faster than other people, right? Helping you like avoid all the trial and error, avoid making silly mistakes that you would have made otherwise, and then having you start over. Like if you know exactly what you need to do, like on the first time around, like you can just go. All you have to do is like go out and actually do the work and execute. Right? You don't have to like spend time figuring out like am I doing things the right way, or did I mess up, or I wonder why I messed up, or
Yeah,
what.
especially because your program saves me so much time. Also, like I don't have to spend like my own time researching how like the interviews work or like what I should be preparing for. I have everything set out for me, and then depending on like the level of firm I'm going for, we can increase the difficulty of what I have to know. So it's very easy. Like it honestly saves more time just doing the program because I have everything I need to know, and there's a database of people who've done the interviews, and like you know what sort of questions are going to be asked.
Yeah, and to be fair, like I'm sure you were still like even with our help, like I don't want people to think like this was a walk in the park for you. Like even with our help, you were super busy, right? Like I mean, to do the things
No,
that
yes, yeah.
to check the boxes you have to check to like to have good grades, to be a student athlete, to be involved in these like very selected clubs, to do internships at the same time, to network with bankers and prep for interviews, like all in like just the 24 hours you have in a day is like it's a lot. It's a lot. That's why most
Yeah,
people.
yeah, there is no time because school years now are super condensed, right? And then interview processes now are super condensed. So you can't like, I'm seeing like students now in my grade like trying to prep for these first rounds with a week of preparation, and that's just not possible unless you know exactly what you need to be doing. So I think that like life is super busy, and I think that like not wasting additional time having to search out the information and go on YouTube and like listen to random strangers. I think that was super helpful as well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm super excited for you, man. I mean, look, obviously KKR is one of the best firms out there, but not only that, I think like, like you said, they pick one person per group. I'm biased, but I think the tech group is the best group. So, I mean, just in terms of like where the future is going, right? Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah, I
think if I
agree.
want to become like a specialist in one industry, like I would pick tech, right?
Yeah, tech or healthcare, those would be the two by far. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like also there's in terms from like a deal flow perspective and like where these firms are really trying to grow and where they're raising the funds to like focus on, like that's where the money's going, right? That's where the investors are putting capital behind. So I think that's like the most exciting area to be investing in. So I think I'm super excited for you, man. Like this is I think like honestly an amazing offer, and um, you're completely deserving. And so I always love seeing people who are deserving and they work their butt off and then they get what they set out to get, right? And so super proud of you, man. And it was honestly, I can't take, I can only take like a little bit of the credit. Like I'm just honored to have been like along for the ride and obviously like help you out where I could have, but like you had to really go and do the work to make this happen because it's like not everyone that does Wall Street Mastermind just, gets this type of outcome either. Right. So like, super happy for you. Huge congrats. And guys, like for those of you that are still listening, like, if you guys are in a similar situation, you want to put your best foot forward, you want to start early, you don't want to just like get in, but you want to get the best outcome possible, regardless of what that may be for you. Because everyone's different, right? You go to different schools, different grades, different experiences, but like whatever the best outcome is for you, like that's what we're here to try to help you accomplish. So if that's what you guys are interested in doing, feel free to reach out to us and reach out to our team. By going to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street's abbreviated to ST, so it's wallstmastermind.com/apply. And what we'll do is like we can't work with everybody. Like this is completely the honest truth. Like we can't work with everyone. We don't have the bandwidth to work with everyone. But if you want to work with us, what we need to do is first learn a bit about your situation and who you are, and like what do you need help with, and then like we can determine like if it's a good fit and if we can actually help you do the things that you want to do, right? And Jai didn't have this when he joined the program, but like more recently, like we now have even an option for people to like get a money back guarantee when they do our program. Like that's how confident we are in our program, right? But also we can only do that because we don't invite people into our program unless we feel like we can actually get them a job, right? So like if that sounds interesting to you, like we'll tell you very honestly whether we feel that confident or not, because we don't feel confident, we just won't offer you the money back guarantee, and then we just won't invite you in the program. All right. So if you guys are interested in that, go and book a call. We look forward to talking to you. And Jai, again, thank you for taking the time to share your experiences with us. And I'm sure this will benefit a lot of people. I'm sure a lot of people are gonna, get off this get off this podcast and then just start preparing right away. Just lit the fire under their butts. And hopefully, I know this will help a lot of people out. So thank you, man.
Dude, thank you, Sam, for all the help. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, that'll be it for this episode. We'll be back with more of these for you guys in the near future. And until then, we'll talk to you guys next time. All right.